first budget hearing on our 2021 budget for the Estes Valley Public Library. And I will then turn the meeting over to our treasurer, David Hemphill, to proceed with the hearing elements. David.
Thank you, John. We've all done this before. I'm going to use the template that we've used before to do our due diligence, so please bear with me on that. So I, as treasurer, officially call this budget hearing to order. I understand we have no public comments. I'm not sure if we have any public watching. I hope our new board members are maybe here tonight. So as treasurer of the library's governing board, I'm calling to order the first of two public hearings for the Estes Valley Public Library District 2021 proposed budget. The Library Board of Trustees will approve the 2021 final budget on Monday, December 14th at 6:30 p.m. The public is invited to provide comments during this budget hearing. The board as a whole body will take comments into consideration as we deliberate on the budget. The usual protocol deviates at this point for our new Zoom meetings, so I assume none has been submitted. Normally you would submit them prior to the meeting, but that's not the case this year. So, but do know that you are allowed to submit comments before the second public hearing. The proposed budget has been announced in both newspapers and posted on the library website. The revised numbers go as such. The total revenue in the budget is $2,006,432. Expenditures are $2,101,352. And the expenditures are divided into two categories, services and support. Services include patron, program and outreach, and technical expenses. Service expenditures part of it is $1,343,318. Support includes administrative, building, and capital expenses. Support expenditures of that is $778,034. The annual balance, which would go into the operating reserve, is from this budget $125,080. At this point, being the first of the two budget hearings, I will invite Claudine, the director, to provide the budget highlights.
Thanks, David, and thanks for mentioning the surplus balance. That's something Cindy and I are going to want to talk about tonight. I did attach the executive summary co-written by Cindy and me, and just a review that the top 3 objectives for next year, I had mentioned in previous board meetings, we're going to try and focus on fewer things and do fewer things very well. And those fewer things are the following: continuing to be responsive to ever-changing COVID needs and expectations. Hopefully you all received the news that COVID standards have changed on the dial, on the safety dial. We are in a higher risk as a community, but happily we're practicing operations at the library at an even higher level, so that if we go one more tick up the dial, we're still prepared. So, so number one, to continue being safety responsive to COVID. Second, as promised, to open the aperture, if you will, on early literacy, and to spend more of our programming, staff training, and other resources on really bringing up our school readiness for the community. We can talk more. That does, I did put in the writing, it does include, we kind of consider EDI, equity, diversity, and inclusion, a subordinate part of that early literacy work. So just letting you know that what we've talked about in the past relates to our early literacy objective. And the third is this compensation analysis, which we've talked about at length, and due to the recent changes within our staffing, which I'll talk about when we get to version 2 of the budget. We were starting to do this anyway because of the Colorado pay equity law that goes into effect January 1. Cindy's as I said earlier, Johnny on the spot, and she can tell us more about what that law is about and what it's for and why we're going to comply with it. But it is also a basic market adjustment, and making sure that you've heard this from, I think, even the January or the February meeting. Right now we have workforce housing thanks to the Friends and Foundation at Cliffhanger, but our mid-level employees can't afford to live in that workforce housing. So how do we align that? So those are the three most significant objectives. That's my proposal to you as the board. And Cindy added some important budget notes, which was that there are no significant increase to health or vision. Although Cindy, I did see that we may have some questions about vision. That's at least in the notes. So I'm not sure, but I'll turn it over to you shortly. Oh, and there was a slight increase to dental. Sorry, it was the dental that was, you're right, thanks. And teledoc, but those are pretty marginal. And so, Mr. Treasurer, Finance Committee, full board, those are the main highlights that I would like to point out for you, and then we can go into the details as you wish. It is my desire, along with our accountant Cindy, once we've reviewed the official draft, which was submitted on October 15th, that we start talking about some of the direction you gave us at the last board meeting, which we'll consider the version 2 budget, and move into that, and then further discussion. So David, unless Cindy has anything to add, that is my executive summary.
At this point, Cindy, you're okay? Okay. Because we'll have more time to discuss this after we get through this comment period. And now, normally there would be public comment if we were in a live meeting, but I understand there have been no questions submitted from the public before this meeting. So I will say thank you for your comments. The budget hearing is now closed. Comments from the public will continue to be received until Monday, December 14th at 6:30, at which time the final 2021 budget will be presented to the Board of Trustees for adoption and appropriation. So now at this point, we'll open up the discussion to the trustees and further on to Claudine and Cindy's follow-up versions. So, and I may even just go ahead and start with moving to Kay, because we had some discussions today, and I know she has some comments on the budget. I think you're muted, Kay. Kay, I think you're muted.
I am. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I had too many things open, couldn't get to it. A couple of things with regards to the compensation, and you alluded to the new act. Can someone just share with me, very highlight, I mean, it's talking about equal pay for equal jobs, but I did a quick perusal, and I still think we have the opportunity to look at seniority, look at special skill set, look at merit. It's like, so I got the sense a new person, we didn't have to bring them up to maybe the same level as someone who's been with us 5-10 years. But, Claudine, Cindy, can either one of you just respond a little bit to that?
I can respond to that, Kay. I did pull it up and re-review it this evening myself. It is basically an extension of equal pay for equal work. And the exact wording is that employers are prohibited of paying different wages to employees who perform substantially similar work. So equal pay for equal work, but difference in pay is justified by several, like you mentioned, Kay: seniority, merit, levels of responsibility, education and training may be very specific to a job. That is one of the reasons we started a draft, just a first draft of pay ranges, because different people may be in the same position. We still have a little bit of room within our established system, the range, to pay them differently based on these items. Seniority is a big one at the library. We've got folks that have been there a very long time doing very good work. And levels of responsibility is different. There's other things in the law I don't think really apply to us. I mean, they apply to everybody, but I don't think we've ever had a problem. The law prohibits employers from seeking wage rate history and maybe setting a current wage for a new employee based on what they've made on other jobs. And then there's also a lot of reporting requirements, record keeping requirements, and certain things that are required when you post a new job. So it goes into quite a few things, but for us, it means solidifying our job descriptions, which we think we've worked on them and we think they're really good, establishing this pay range, and then also comparing our, before the range, we need to figure out, how we compare to the market. And the market includes other libraries, regional, as well as our direct competitors here in Estes Park.
Okay.
Competitors and colleagues, right, Cindy?
Yes, competitors. Yeah. Did that help, Kay?
Uh-huh.
Okay.
That does help. And was some of that contemplated? Because I look at some of the individuals and I mean, we're looking at some pretty hefty increases. And, I just, I think about it and, I don't know all these individuals to know if they're new or what, but, I think about there should be factors that are applied for some of the things that they talked about that you mentioned. And was that contemplated when we looked at this? I'm looking at the compensation spreadsheet now.
Yes, Kay, that was contemplated. A lot of the research that we did in-house that we have now turned over to a consultant that we've hired to help us establish was the Employers Council compensation surveys. They do a very complex survey every year, and they do one that's specific to libraries and specific to libraries in Colorado. So a lot of the recommendations we have for 2021 for salary is based on looking at what other libraries are paying for similar positions and trying to bring some of those people up to a livable Estes Park wage and more of a market wage.
Okay, and that's as per the EC survey?
A lot of it came from the Employers Council survey. Yes,
Okay.
That was the initial. We also surveyed other libraries and our employment competitors here in Estes Park, but trying to pull it all together and figure out what jobs would kind of line up with what jobs and what's pay ranges would align with the market. That's what we're looking for help with from this compensation study consultant.
And when is his results going to be available? His or hers?
Hers, yeah. Her name is Lori, and she did the compensation study for the town of Estes Park. She was referred to us from the town, so she already knows all of our benefits. She doesn't have to look at our benefits. She doesn't have to, we're not asking her to help us with job descriptions. We gave them to her to review because that's what she needs to do her study. And she is definitely on board to try to help us get this done by the end of the year.
But we won't have that input before the budget has to be finalized.
That's why the ranges and those kinds of things aren't finalized. The only thing in this current budget is bringing some of those lower level paid employees up to at least what we were seeing in the Employers Council survey and the livable wage for Estes Park.
Okay. Okay. When I look at that, it appears to me that you've done a lot of work with levels, I think 3 and 4, a lot of focus there. It'd be nice to have the consultant's input before we have to finalize the budget. The only thing I would say that I request really is at the director level. Since we don't have that information available, I'd like to have a placeholder of, something more than 2%. I was thinking more like a 4%. And then we can look at all that data and the, the actual review and make a decision then.
Well, and there's a key point, Kay, that we talked about. We have postponed basically Claudine's review until January. Is that correct, Claudine? So without having that prior and without having this consultant's recommendations is why we discussed using a starting point of this figure of 4% as a placeholder, as Kay described.
Okay, and I've given it some additional thought. We had originally thought about canceling our executive session for a formal evaluation of the library director. And I think we will go ahead and plan to have that session after all, and be able to have a perhaps less formal, not filling out the form, but each of the trustees coming together at that session to have our discussion so that we feel that we have at least addressed an informal evaluation on Claudine before we approve the budget at that level. So
If that's
please put on your
acceptable,
back on your calendars, the December, I need to look up the date, sorry. December 3rd, 6:30 p.m. We will have an executive session via Zoom to have that discussion. And I'm asking each trustee to look at the 5 areas of strategic goals and be prepared to individually discuss your comments with regard to the library director. We will then try to follow up with a more formal, either in January or February timeframe evaluation. Claudine, if you would like to submit anything around those prior to that, that's fine, but I'm not requiring it of you. Okay.
John, if that's doable, that works for the finance committee because while we feel certain that the pay raise is merited, we want to do the due diligence of documentation for our public record.
I think that's very wise, and we will proceed that way. Thank you.
Okay. Kay, any further things you wanted to say?
No, the only thing is, in talking to the consultant, if they can provide anything sooner than later that could help us before we finalize the budget, it would be very helpful.
Agreed.
Okay, allow me to say Cindy has been fantastic through this entire process, and we've sort of divided and conquered in our data gathering, and I think you're helping us build a bridge. It might be premature, David, but to the next version of the budget, where when we had two supervisory level folks terminate their employment at the same time, it added a sense of urgency to an external consultant that I did not recognize before. So please know, when we contacted Lori, I said, Lori, if I knew in July what I know today, I would have called you, in September, August or September. So the sense of urgency she's received from us is crystal clear.
Okay.
Thank you.
And tell her there's a lot of people pushing you from behind.
I hope this isn't a going into the weeds too much question, Claudine, but so you have to hire 2 supervisory staff members, which has a big impact on the future of the library. So do you have enough financial resources to attract the quality of people that we need?
I don't know, Bill. That was the drive to finally get a more educated opinion on what the market will require for someone of Mark and Diana's skill level. What I can tell you is I'm not sure if you all noticed in our new board member, Pete, his background is in HR, and I do look forward to speaking with him for a bit more of strategic staffing guidance on where we're finding these folks, because if we're finding them from outside of Estes Park, as you all know, that presents a whole different level of engagement, whether it's compensation, whether it's moving expense, but things get a little more expensive. And Bill, I'm not even sure yet if we're going to be ready as soon as January, which is my objective, is that we hit the ground running in January, posting those positions.
Well, I guess my concern from a board point of view is that it's pretty obvious. Those are absolutely crucial positions. And they're, from what I know, brilliant people who are going to get replaced. So I would hate for it to be January or February and you don't have enough financial resources to attract the best people. I don't know what the solution to that is, but
well, I'm happy to tell you that Cindy presented me with a bit of a solution at about 2:30 this afternoon. Is that fair, Cindy? Is we were looking at our at the version 2, which we submitted to you, and Cindy's position is this isn't enough of a reserve for what may come from the compensation assessment. And so we took it upon ourselves. It wasn't as hard as I thought it would be to start shaving and creating a greater reserve for 2021 than we currently have in there. So the objective, Bill, is it's a good short-term solution, and I thank Cindy for it. So we'll have that version 3 to this board, along with any other input or feedback the board members have tonight for the second budget hearing. So, we have the official version that we submitted to the public on October 15th. Tonight, after listening to your input, we have a version 2, but already we have improvements to versions 3. Sorry for my lengthy statement. Bill, in response to that very problem statement, is we're going to await the survey results, but more importantly, we're going to prepare for a probably larger range than we've had in the past for those 2 positions. Thank you, Cindy.
Cindy, we'll try to give you some more positive comments. I know in the past year we have not been very supportive, but I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I heard Claudine thank you a couple of times, and it's just so. And one other comment is, darn Bill, we're going to miss you.
Okay, I'm a bit confused with what you referred to as a reserve.
Oh, surplus.
Surplus.
Sorry for my inexact language.
Between revenue and expenses, is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, 60,000.
I think perhaps in our budgeting we refer to it as the projected annual balance. So Cindy, can I ask you to take it away?
Yeah, it is the surplus between, or the difference between revenue and expenses. Currently, in the first version that's on the website, there's a surplus of $125,000, but we've got so much more information since that version. In our version 2 that I think each of you have just in Excel format right now, our surplus is only $60-some thousand, and just that I felt that was pretty tight, given this compensation study and the new supervisor positions that we're going to be posting. It doesn't give us a lot of room to move, and so we needed to look at other things. And so you will see in a version 3, we were able to tighten up a few things. And as each day goes on, we're getting new and better information as to what to fine tune our 2021 numbers. And so we're going to be able to tighten that up and have a bigger surplus that's going to give us some room for different salaries, I guess.
Okay.
Does that sound?
Yeah, well, I appreciate that always, trying to tighten things up and look at them a little closer. However, given that if we approve a budget, if we decide that we need more money in the budget, it's not just a matter of drawing on that differential. The board would have to approve an increase to the expense budget.
Absolutely.
And I would like us all to continue to remember that we've been building up a fairly large long-term reserve to handle when in 1 year we may not be able to otherwise cover the entire budget with that year's revenue. So we have other funds that the board could draw on to meet the need, but it would come from having to have a supplemental budget approved at the time when we know what that would be. Okay?
I do agree with that.
To understand that element. Go ahead.
Cindy, what is the goal?
What, pardon?
What surplus goal are you kind of shooting for?
Well, just for my own comfort level, I, for some reason, think it should be over 100,000 in case anything unexpected comes up. And just this seemed quite tight to me with some things we want to do in the future. And John, I do realize we do have good reserves, and absolutely a resolution would have to be done if there are changes. But one of the pieces of advice that Dwayne Hudson gave me last year when I was very first starting, because I started right about budget season, was you don't use discretionary funds for fixed costs. That's one of the basic rules. Just don't forget that. And compensation is going to be a fixed cost. If our surplus is only 62,000 and then we have to do a resolution and dip into reserves for compensation, that's not a good place to be, I didn't think. So we need to look at other costs and it's not service costs. We didn't cut any service costs. But we need to make sure we have enough room to comfortably pay these salaries 2021 going forward. That was my thought.
Cindy, I think that's all good advice, and the advice Dwayne gave you is in normal times very good advice. But we may be dealing with extraordinary times. I think a 62,000 is a plenty surplus for the salary levels we're talking about, number one. But at this juncture, I think we've had such good years for such a long run that we're enjoying the luxury of that and can't get out of that mindset. That's why I appreciate what John said, that when it comes to it, if we need to provide the services, we have the resources. We're in a very good position at this point. So I just wanted to temper that a little bit with the current extraordinary times we're going through. So as we move on, Cindy, was there more comments, or should we open up to other people's comments?
Well, have I answered the questions that were presented?
Well, I feel you did. Anyone else chime in, please?
Good then.
So dealing with our small board and not many public comments. Beth Ann, anyone else, any comments at this point on the budget?
Yeah, I guess I would share that, to Kay's questions about some of the salary changes, that I believe, and Claudine and Cindy, correct me if I'm wrong, but rather than try to resolve getting people to those levels in 1 year, we've really are looking right now at, in some cases at least, a 2-year increment to try to get people into the brackets that we're being told are appropriate from the Employees Council.
John, I emphatically agree, and you'll be happy to know that the consultant, without any prompting on our part, said Cindy shared with her the budget, job description, so she's aware of our comparables as well that we collected. And one of the first things she said to us is, so don't get too excited that you think you're going to do all this in 1 year. This could be 2 years, it might even be 3 years. And, you know, Cindy and I shed our tears of gratitude and said, go do your work and hurry on back.
Okay, well, Beth, Ann, or anyone else comments at this point?
Okay, I guess the
I would like to
question,
get comments on.
I'm sorry, David.
Go ahead, John.
If we're going to give Claudine and staff any further directions on adjustments to the budget that we will receive at the next time, now is the opportunity and the chance. So if there are any areas in that proposed budget that you have concern or would like to see some other adjustments, now is your opportunity.
And John, I would specifically ask everyone to address Kay's proposal that we discussed of bringing Claudine's more into what we currently think is in line. Again, we'll take the advice of the consultant and other reports, but a 4% raise at this point gets Claudine a good way to that level that kind of separately, John, you and Kay had come to at about the $103,000 level. 4% increase at this point would put her just over the $100,000 mark, a good way to that level. But that's just the starting point. We really want to hear if the board agrees with that kind of movement at this point or some other proposal.
Yeah, correct. So that's something the finance committee and myself have believe is appropriate. I'd like to hear from the other board members.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think we've been talking about it for a couple of years now. And so it makes sense to me. We're still moving in that direction.
Thank you, Beth.
Yeah, absolutely. We want to keep Claudine here and we want her to be fairly compensated. So it's a no-brainer to me.
Okay, we'll have a chance to do the, as I said, the informal, if you will, evaluation with input from all board members. And Ann Finley, you would be invited to that session also.
Okay.
You have direct interactions. And so we'll plan on that meeting for December the 3rd and see if our evaluation is consistent with this kind of direction.
So pending any further comments, I don't think other than the pay scale we were just discussing, we have any other direct orders from the board to take care of at this point, directions to be taken. So go ahead, Claudine.
I would like to I'd like to thank you first for the discussion and regarding the director wages and recognizing my appreciation of it. I would also say it might be worthwhile knowing that Cindy and I are about to make sure there's adequate surplus to see what the consultant says. And that it's part of a larger movement of looking at compensation for the whole organization. So please know I hope it's a sign of your trust in my performance, and I'm deeply touched, and I hope you will consider hold that thought. Okay. David, I'm sorry. I had a second.
Go ahead, please.
Thank you. So moving to the version 2 budget, I would like to, and this is really this is very self-serving. Cindy and I want to make sure that we come back at the second hearing with some precision of what it is the board is looking for. So I'd like to bring you back that the version 1 was flat, and then at that meeting we were given some informal but clear direction to look at complying with the 2% increase standard, inflationary standard for our collections and services. So by putting that back in, it added, it moved us to, it reduced the surplus, I should say. But if you look at the flat plus 2% increase for materials compared to the 2% across the board as if it were just an ordinary non-COVID year, you'll notice that the surpluses are very, very marginal. And so my question to the board is, would you like us to go ahead with the more robust 2% down the line version, or would you like us to stick with the flat while moving towards the greater surplus? So that's my question, David, because it'll help Cindy and I be more precise in what we deliver in a few weeks.
Let's go around the table and get each individual response. Kay, would you like to start?
I'm not opposed to doing the 2%. However, I think some thought has to be to some of the material or program expenses in our COVID world. Does that make sense? Are they better used someplace else? So to just do the broad brush, I don't know that makes sense, especially when we looked at your focus, your 3 points for the coming. I think some places you might have to increase it more than the 2%. Some of the, programmings or tools that you need for that. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm okay with it, but I think it has to be thoughtful.
Thank you. Beth?
I'm listening to Kay, and it's informing my thoughts. So thanks for that, Kay. I would apply that also to folks that are working, that it has been challenging to be in that public space, for folks to be interacting with patrons, to be like taking on that risk. And I know that we're all doing that in some way. And so if it really is doable, and I'm not a numbers person, so I'm trying to find what the actual difference is between the two, and it's probably right there looking at me, and maybe you can just tell me. But if it's really doable, I would say definitely go for the 2% across the board, if that works. And I trust that you all know if that works or not, because I also think that it's been quite a lot for folks to be working in these conditions.
Thank you, Beth. Bill?
I have a little question. First. So part of the primary objective 1 is to increase the digital collection. And that's because of increased demand, I presume, during COVID?
It is because there's a decrease in print demand, and that we believe we can drive. Oh, am I on? Yes, okay. Oh, thank you, Cindy. Sorry, guys. Bill, it's because there's a decrease in demand for physical items, and what we're seeing at other libraries is a marked increase in digital. And I know we kind of touched on this a couple weeks ago, but we've begun the process of reminding folks, if you want to look at it, read it, or listen to it, we can deliver it to your home through the World Wide Web, So it is an anticipatory point, Bill. We're hoping that that's the place to push.
And the difference in the bottom line between version 1 and version 2 is only about $4,000, I believe. I tried to. Do I have?
No, you're talking more like 60,000, Bill, because the version 1 was like 120 some, and it's now for version 2 down to the 60,000 range.
I meant the two different forms.
Scenarios. Yeah.
Scenarios, yeah. Sorry, wrong language. Is only about $4,000.
Right.
And can I say that in both of these scenarios in version 2, children's programs and children's discovery packs based upon K, like you mentioned, our primary objectives, they are well over 2% that the program team has requested and we have built in. The children's programs would increase from 21,000 to 25,000. I don't know the exact percentage, but and
About
then
18, maybe.
thank you. The discovery packs from 1,354 up to 1,500. So we have boosted those even in addition to everything else being at 2%.
Okay, thank you.
So I guess my only comment would be that rather than those two scenarios, that you focus on the 3 primary objectives and make sure those are funded generously, and that those areas where there's a reduction in services, hold those flat. So that's all.
Okay, thank you. David?
Well, Claudine, number one, I would like addressing your salary. We really wanted to acknowledge you're stepping up to the role in an extraordinary year, and we don't anticipate 2021 being any easier for you. So we just really want to acknowledge that you've stepped up during these extraordinary times and did the thinking on that. I don't think you start with a paradigm of increasing everything 2% across the board. I think most paradigms have changed and you need the flexibility to target what you think the new world will be. So I am all for more than 2% where you feel you really think the services need to be targeted, and flat for the other ones other than that, and having some flexibility for your discretion on those is what I feel.
Thank you, David. So my comments are with COVID this year and the decrease in several areas of expenditure, we're the estimate for year end right now that Cindy and Claudine have given us is that we'll be $200,000 under the 2020 budget, which increases the amount of surplus that potentially can go into long term. I think the staff, Claudine, have continued to do an excellent job of trying to meet the needs of our patrons and really finding it difficult, I suspect, to really spend the funds that were in the budget to begin with because of the different approach that's needed. I agree with David. Also, the 2% perhaps is old school thinking for us, and we need to, while I don't think we should be cutting or reducing our budget necessarily, I think we should be adding to those areas where our priorities and our strategy is directing us. And so I think the way David expressed that is very well said. So I'm just not too concerned personally with the amount of surplus in the coming year. My guess is that even if we have to pay some new supervisors a little bit more than what's in there right now, they aren't going to be getting it except for about 9 months out of the year for next year. Now, that said, I agree with what Cindy said. These are ongoing expenses. But again, we intentionally built up reserves, long-term reserves, in order to meet what we knew would be increasing expenses in out years. And those were intended by that board at that time to be used eventually and not just sit there as ongoing reserves necessarily. If we can meet our objectives and our strategies with each year's revenues, wonderful. But I would hate to see us start feeling like we need to cut back at this point in time with the kind of reserves that we have intentionally built up to cover those conditions. So enough said.
Very well said, John. I think there is a human tendency for boards to see reserves as sacred. And they're not. They're meant for exactly extraordinary times. So while I don't want to use them, they're not off the board as far as I'm concerned. And I'm not concerned about as much about plus this year as I might have been in prior years. So, okay, in this budget hearing, I think we've heard from anyone, but one last chance to put any other input anyone has. Claudine, you're waving again.
I'd just like to call out the president of the Friends and Foundation. It's nice to have someone with a voice who's not necessarily a decision maker, but Anne, you have influence, and we'd be very interested in your opinion.
One of the things that I really like is how you've pared down what your objectives are for this year. It'll be really helpful for us, particularly because it's early learning. That's a really powerful tool for fundraising. So I think that's really great. So thank you for that. I also would like to agree with David that we need to be a little more flexible. We're trying to be that way with our funding also. We can't just be, this is the way it is. These are really hard times. They're different and unusual. So I do like the way that the trustees are looking at bringing people up to speed for their salaries. Estes Park is known for having really low salaries and having it difficult for people to live here. So I like that you're looking at that in a really clear, good way. Thank you. That's all.
Thanks, Anne.
Thanks, Anne.
I really appreciate the direction
And thank
you've
you,
all
Claudine, for
clarified. Thank you.
Good. Okay. I think everyone's had an opportunity. I give one last chance if anyone has a comment before we bring this study session meeting to a close. Bill, are you raising your hand? No? Okay. Everyone's good? Yes, Claudine.
It's important that Cindy and I are crystal clear before we let you go. Cindy, are there any questions? I've heard very consistently the call to, and I think Bill used the word, did you use the word sumptuously? Sumptuously fund our targets, and that it's up to us to look at the rest of the budget for areas where it can be flat and not feel adhered to by the 2%. And of course, all of this is made possible by the exceptional staff we have at the library. So thank you for that flexibility as well. Cindy, was there anything that you felt a stone that was unturned for us to return at the next hearing with clarity?
I don't feel like we left stones unturned. I feel like, so I know which scenario of version 2 that I need to post to the website for the public, correct? So that would be what we call flat. So I will be posting that on the website as is, and then we will move forward with that only one scenario, which will be very helpful, as opposed to multiple, and start work on version 3 for a very tight draft to be presented at the November board meeting in a week or however many days. Yeah.
11 days.
11 days. Okay.
Thank you, Cindy. Perfect. And thank you, David.
I agree that if you have that ready for that meeting, that'll be great that we can discuss it at that point. So,
And you'll have opportunity next week for the Finance Committee as well as the Government Affairs Committees to meet with Claudine and Cindy to have any other discussion and input and preparations.
Claudia and I did look at the calendar. Are we going ahead and having the finance meeting, what would technically be a week early on the 7th? Cindy, will you be prepared for that, or is that, because the regular board meeting, no, I'm thinking of this wrong. I'm thinking about the next month already. Sorry. So
Yeah.
we're looking at the 14th.
November 9th is your meeting usually.
Right, okay,
And
sorry.
the
I was
16th
thinking December already, so,
Yeah, November 16th is our next board meeting.
okay.
So, yeah, next week with fine weather that's going to come our way.
It's 2020, Bill. It'll be, or John, will be typical for 2020, so.
It'll be what it will be, right? Okay. All right. If I don't see anyone else needing to make any comments at 7:27, excuse me, 7:22 p.m., I'll call this study session and budget hearing to a close and thank each of you for